I never imagined I'd live to see the day my own son would rob me, not once, not twice, but for years. "Son, this is emergency money," I whispered as he emptied my account right in front of me. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of everything." But the only thing Ethan ever took care of was himself. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. My name is Margaret. And I'm 65 years old. I spent 40 years working as a nurse, long nights, endless shifts, and raising my son Ethan all on my own. Every penny I saved was for him. Because I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do. I just never imagined my biggest sacrifice would become my biggest mistake. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, make sure you're subscribed, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The kind that usually passes without meaning. The kind you forget, until it becomes the day that changes your life forever. Ethan, my 37-year-old son, was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee I had just poured for him. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, catching the gray at his temples, something he inherited from me. His 65-year-old mother, "Mom," he began in that calm, steady tone he always used when he wanted something. "I've been thinking. Starting with your next pension deposit, we should transfer all your money to my account. I'll manage everything for you." My cup froze midair. I stared at him, trying to understand whether I'd heard him right. "What do you mean, you'll manage everything, Ethan?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "It's simple," he said, smiling. That same charming, practiced smile I'd seen since he was a boy. "You've worked your whole life. You deserve to rest. Let me handle the bills, the accounts, all of it. It's the least I can do." He said it like he was offering me peace. But something about the way he spoke, like it was already decided, made me uneasy. I'd spent 40 years as a nurse in public hospitals, raising Ethan alone after his father left when he was 3. I'd lived frugally, saving every rupee I could. Tiny apartments. Old clothes. No vacations. Also my son could have what I never did, a good education, decent clothes, a better life. "I don't know, son," I said carefully. "I've always managed my own money." "Exactly," he replied smoothly, placing his hand over mine. "You've worked hard enough. Let me take care of you now." The words sounded beautiful, the kind every mother wants to hear. But deep down, something in me was whispering a warning. The first red flag when Ethan left that afternoon, he handed me an envelope before walking out. Inside were bank forms for me to sign, documents that would give him access to my accounts. "Just think about it," he said, smiling. That night, I sat at my small dining table and stared at the papers for hours. My gut told me not to sign, but my heart, the heart of a mother who'd spent her life sacrificing, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he really wanted to help still. Doubt lingered. I started remembering little things. How he never brought anything when he and his wife, Clara, came for dinner every Friday. How he'd borrowed money so many times, always promising to pay me back, but never did. How he'd bought a brand new car last year, even though his salary shouldn't have allowed it. Maybe I was overthinking. Or maybe I'd been blind for too long. That night, I pulled out my bank statements. It wasn't something I did often, I trusted him too much to feel the need. But as I went line by line through the transactions, one caught my eye. A withdrawal of $1,800 from a branch on the other side of town. A day I was home all day, then another, 2 months earlier, a transfer to an account I didn't recognize. My heart began to race. I opened my wallet. My debit card was there, right where I always kept it. Then I remembered. 3 months earlier, Ethan had borrowed my purse, saying he needed to check something in a prescription note. I'd thought nothing of it. But that night, the truth hit me like ice water down my spine that he must have copied my card details. My own son had been stealing from me. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the edge of my bed, shaking, feeling something inside me break. I'd spent my whole life believing love was enough, that no child, no matter how flawed, could betray a parent like that. I was wrong. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. I told the young manager what had happened. She listened kindly and said, "Mrs. Margaret, you'd be surprised how common this is. Family fraud happens more than you think." Her words stung more than comforted. When she asked if I wanted to file a complaint, I couldn't bring myself to say yes. How do you turn your own son into a criminal case? I just asked her to change my passwords, issue new cards, and check for any accounts I didn't know about. She nodded, and what she found shattered what was left of my trust. A credit card under my name with a $7,500 debt. An electricity bill for Ethan's address, under my name. And worst of all, a $15,000 loan taken in my identity. I walked home that day feeling like the ground had been pulled from under me. The boy I raised alone, the one I once held in my arms and swore I'd protect from the world, had turned into the very danger I needed protecting from. That night, I made a decision. A painful, quiet, final one. If my son could betray me this deeply, then I had to stop being the mother who kept forgiving him. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with every statement spread out like pieces of my broken trust. I went through each number, each date, each transaction, and every line felt like another stab in my chest. The total theft came to over $30,000. $30,000, that was my life's work. My savings. My sacrifices. Gone. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but more than anything, I wanted to understand why. Why would my own son do this? What had I done wrong as a mother? Then I remembered all those Fridays, the dinners, the fake smiles, the empty "love you, Mom" as he walked out with leftovers and my trust. And that's when something inside me hardened. For the first time in my life, I stopped feeling like a mother. I felt like a woman who'd been robbed, and she was ready to fight back. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. One to a moving company. One to a lawyer recommended by the bank. And one to a real estate agent. By nightfall, my house, the home where I had raised Ethan, was empty. Every piece of furniture, every memory, every trace of the life he'd known was gone. I sold it all. I wasn't planning to run away. I was planning to start over. That Friday, as usual, Ethan and his wife Clara arrived for dinner. They walked in laughing, expecting the same free meal, the same cozy house, but instead, they found an echo. The living room was bare except for a single kitchen chair placed in the middle. I was sitting on it, waiting. Ethan froze in the doorway. His wife gasped, "Mom, what happened? Where's all your stuff?" "I sold it," I said quietly. He blinked, confused. "Sold it? Why on earth would you do that?" I looked at him steadily. "Because if someone's going to manage my finances, I figured I should at least have some cash on hand first." For a second, he didn't understand. Then I saw it, that flicker of anger he always hid behind a fake smile. His voice dropped an octave. "Are you crazy? How are we supposed to have dinner here? How are we supposed to relax?" Those words. We. Supposed to. It wasn't about me. It never was. "That's the problem, Ethan," I said softly. "You've lived your whole life thinking my house, my money, my time, they were all yours. But they weren't. Not anymore." His wife stepped forward, her heels clicking against the bare wooden floor. "Margaret, this is ridiculous. We come here every week to check on you, to make sure you're okay, and this is how you repay us? You're being selfish." Selfish. That word burned through me like fire. For years, I'd worked double shifts to pay for Ethan's education. I'd gone without new clothes, new furniture, even heating some winters, all so he could live comfortably. And now, I was selfish. I stood up slowly, meeting their eyes. "Dinner isn't ready," I said calmly. "In fact, there won't be dinner tonight. If you're hungry, there's a restaurant 2 blocks away. You can eat there." The silence was deafening. Ethan stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Maybe he was." Finally, he said in a low, dangerous voice, "You need to be careful, Mom. A woman your age, living alone, without family. It can end badly. I'm all you have. Remember that." That was it, the moment the last thread between us snapped. The threat wasn't even hidden anymore. They left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. The sound echoed in the empty house long after they were gone, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt peace. Lonely, painful peace. But peace nonetheless. The following week, I met with my lawyer. Together, we documented everything: the fraudulent withdrawals, the fake loans, the unpaid debts. The total loss was $32,000, 3 years of quiet theft disguised as love. I filed a report with the authorities. I didn't want to destroy my son's life. But I also couldn't let him keep destroying mine. Then I did something that changed everything. I rented a small apartment across town, 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, nothing fancy. And one morning, as I walked past a lawyer's office, a colorful brochure on the waiting room table caught my eye. It said, "It's never too late to start over." It was an ad for an entrepreneurship program for senior citizens. I stared at that paper for a long time. Start over. I'd been defined by one role my whole life, Ethan's mother. But who was I without him? Without the constant giving, the worrying, the forgiving? That week, I enrolled in the program. On the first day, I sat quietly in the back row among people my age, faces lined with years of laughter, grief, and resilience. The instructor, a cheerful man in his 50s, asked us to introduce ourselves. When my turn came, I didn't sugarcoat it. "I'm here because I realized I raised a thief, not a son," I said. "And now I need to find out who I am besides being someone's mother." There was a brief silence. Then, surprisingly, applause. Nods of understanding. Faces that said we get it. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. One of the exercises in the program was to think about what we loved doing before life got in the way. For me, it was easy, cooking. Specifically, making sweets. My grandmother had been Portuguese and taught me her old recipes: custard tarts, coconut flan, chocolate truffles. I hadn't made them in years, but when I tried again, something in me lit up. I started bringing small batches to class. People loved them. Soon, I began taking small orders. Each tart I baked, each truffle I rolled, felt like reclaiming a part of myself Ethan could never touch. By the end of the program, I had a business plan, a name, Margaret's Delights, and the courage to rent a small kitchen space. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Meanwhile, the lawyer called with updates. The investigation had uncovered even more deception. Ethan had taken out a home renovation loan using my name as guarantor, racking up another $10,000 in hidden debt. But I didn't cry this time. I didn't shake. I just breathed and said, "Thank you. Let's move forward." For the first time, I wasn't reacting to what Ethan did. I was acting for myself. Every day after that, I woke up early, put on my apron, and made sweets. I delivered them to local cafes, small events, and nursing homes. And slowly, people started remembering the name Margaret's Delights. I was no longer the mother who'd been robbed. I was the woman who rebuilt her life, one custard tart at a time. The day my lawyer called, I was standing in the community kitchen, dusted in flour and surrounded by the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. "Margaret," he said, "Ethan's lawyers want to settle." For a moment, I just stood there, holding the phone. The noise of mixers and ovens faded. He continued, "They're offering to repay the $32,000 you lost, plus $10,000 for emotional damages. He'll also publicly admit what he did, and clear your credit record." I leaned against the counter, my heart pounding. After months of legal documents, sleepless nights, and heartbreak, it was finally happening. Justice, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like release, because the truth was, no amount of money could ever repay what I'd lost, not the savings, not the security, not the trust. Still, I accepted. The next morning, I signed the papers in a lawyer's office that smelled faintly of old books and coffee. Ethan avoided my eyes the entire time. His wife, Clara, didn't come. When it was over, we sat in silence for a few minutes. I could see him fidgeting, running his hands through his hair, trying to find the right words. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why did you do it, Ethan?" He looked down. "At first it was just once. I needed to cover the down payment for the house. I told myself I'd pay it back." He laughed bitterly. "But then it got easy. You never asked questions. You trusted me." The simplicity of that answer hit me harder than I expected. I never asked. Because I trusted him, and in that moment, I realized, blind love can be just as dangerous as hate. Months passed. My business grew faster than I imagined. Margaret's Delights became a small sensation. My custard tarts were featured in a local newspaper. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost. I was defined by what I'd built. Then, one quiet evening, as I was closing the shop, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in handwriting I knew instantly. Ethan's. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at it. My first instinct was to throw it away. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, stopped me. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, and opened it. Inside was a short letter and an old photograph, me, holding baby Ethan in my arms. I looked exhausted but happy. The letter read, "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness or even a reply. I just wanted you to know I started therapy 6 months ago. I'm trying to understand why I hurt the one person who sacrificed everything for me. My therapist says I have a long road ahead. That rebuilding trust, if it's ever possible, takes years, not months. He says first, I need to become someone worthy of trust. I saw your shop on social media. It looks beautiful. I'm proud of you, even though I don't have the right to be. Ethan. I read it 3 times. I searched between the lines for manipulation, guilt, some hidden trap, but there was none. It was just remorse. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. Just a quiet, complicated sadness. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But that night, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was the beginning of peace. 2 years later, life looked completely different. The shop had grown. I had hired a young assistant, Clara, not my daughter-in-law, but a cheerful culinary student who reminded me of hope. Together, we created new recipes, new dreams. Then one afternoon, while I was teaching Clara how to make perfect custard filling, she peeked out the window and said, "Margaret, there's a man asking for you. Says he's your son." My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen Ethan since the settlement. Part of me wanted to tell her to say I wasn't there. But another part, the part that had healed, rebuilt, and learned to stand tall, whispered, "Face it, tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes, I said. I washed my hands, straightened my apron, and took a deep breath before walking out front. Ethan was sitting at a corner table. He looked thinner, older, smaller somehow. Time had humbled him. "Hello, Ethan," I said, keeping my voice calm. He looked up and smiled nervously. "Mom, you look different." "I am different," I said simply. "What brings you here?" He hesitated. "I just wanted to see you. To see this place. It's incredible." "I never thought." He stopped, searching for words. "You always seemed so tired before. Now you seem alive." We sat in silence for a while. Clara brought coffee and a plate of sweets, sensing the weight of the moment. "I'm still in therapy," he said after a few sips. 2 years now. It's not easy. Facing what I did. Facing who I was. "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since the beginning. He stared at the cup in his hands. "At first, it was convenience. You were always there. You never said no. Then I started believing I was entitled to everything you had. Like I deserved it." It was brutally honest. "And somehow, that made it easier to hear. The therapist says I have narcissistic traits," he added quietly. "That I saw you as someone who existed to serve me, not as a person with your own life." I nodded slowly. "That sounds right." He looked up, eyes wet. "I didn't come for forgiveness. I came to tell you I'm trying to change. I'm sorry for what I did, all of it." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood. Healing wasn't about getting an apology. It was about becoming the kind of person who didn't need one to move forward. "I'm glad you're getting help," I said softly. "Truly." He smiled faintly. "Thank you." We sat together in silence, eating the sweets I had made with my own hands. At one point, he said quietly, "You've built something incredible, Mom. I'm proud of you." And for once, I believed him. Before he left, I found myself saying, "You can come by sometimes. For coffee. To talk." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was possibility. When he walked out that door, I didn't feel the old ache anymore. I felt something else, something lighter. For the first time in a very long time, I realized that I didn't need my son's approval to feel whole. My worth, my peace, my happiness, they were finally my own. After Ethan's visit, my life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. There were still moments of sadness, reminders of the years I had lost, the trust that could never fully return. But there was also something new. Calm. I learned that peace doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means you finally stop fighting what's already gone. Within a year, Margaret's Delights became more than a small bakery. We expanded, adding a cozy cafe section where customers could sit and enjoy coffee with their pastries. I hired 2 more people, a retired woman named Helen, who had a knack for baking, and a young man named Ryan who handled the counter with endless smiles. Together, we turned that little kitchen into something bigger than I ever dreamed. And I'll never forget the day Clara, my assistant, came running into the shop, breathless and excited. Our video just hit 10,000 views. She said, showing me her phone. It was a short clip of me making custard tarts, my wrinkled hands folding the dough, dusting it with flour, the golden crusts coming out of the oven. The comments were full of strangers saying things like, "She reminds me of my grandma," and "You can taste her love through the screen." 4. Someone who had once been invisible. Just another old woman society stopped noticing. It felt surreal. Clara smiled at me and said, "You don't just make sweets, Margaret. You tell stories with sugar." And maybe she was right. Every tart I baked was a chapter of my life. Every truffle, a piece of resilience. Every customer, a reminder that I had built something with my own 2 hands, something Ethan could never take. 6 months later, Clara nervously approached me one afternoon, holding a neatly written proposal. "I want to become your business partner," she said, her voice trembling. "Not to take over, but to help expand. I've prepared a plan." I looked at her youth, her passion, her honesty, and I saw myself decades ago, before life hardened me. For a moment, fear whispered in my ear, "What if she betrays you too?" But then another voice, stronger and wiser, said, "Don't let the past steal your future." I opened a drawer, took out an old leather notebook, and placed it on the table. It was filled with my grandmother's handwritten recipes, some over 100 years old. "I've never shown this to anyone," I said. "Not even Ethan. But I think it's time these recipes live on." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "A legacy only matters if it's shared." That day, I agreed to her partnership, 51% for me, 49% for her. Enough to guide, but also enough to let her grow. For the first time in my life, I trusted someone again. And this time, it felt right. A year later, I received an unexpected call, from the same bank where my nightmare had begun years ago. "Mrs. Margaret," the manager said warmly, "we're hosting a seminar on financial literacy for women. We'd love for you to share your story." At first, I laughed. "Me? I'm just a baker." But she insisted. "You're an example of resilience. Of what it means to start over. Women need to hear that." So, I agreed. The next week, I stood before a small group of about 15 women, some widows, some mothers, all carrying invisible scars. "My name is Margaret," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "And a few years ago, I discovered that my son was stealing from me." Gasps. Silence. Then I continued. "I lost everything. My money, my trust, my peace. But I learned that sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find yourself." As I spoke, I saw tears, nods, soft smiles. One woman raised her hand and asked, "How did you find the strength to forgive him?" I paused, thinking. "I didn't," I said gently. "At least not at first. I found the strength to forgive myself, for ignoring the red flags, for loving blindly, for thinking sacrifice was the same as love. Once I forgave myself, the rest didn't matter as much." After the talk, women came up to hug me. Some cried. One whispered, "You just gave me the courage to take my life back." And that was the moment I realized, my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a bridge for others to cross. Months turned into years. The shop expanded again. I started teaching pastry classes twice a week, older women, young mothers, even teenage girls learning their first recipe. We didn't just bake. We shared stories. Laughter. Healing. Ethan began visiting occasionally, bringing his little daughter, Mia. She had his eyes but not his shadows. She called me grandma from the first day we met. We baked together, her tiny hands rolling truffle balls beside mine. And sometimes, when I looked up and saw Ethan watching from the kitchen doorway, I saw something in his expression that I hadn't seen in years, humility. He never asked for forgiveness again. And I never promised it. We just coexisted. Quietly. Kindly. Some wounds don't need to be closed. They just need to stop bleeding. On my 70th birthday, Margaret's Delights hosted a small event, not to sell pastries, but to launch something new. My book. Sweet Lessons, Recipes for Starting Over. It wasn't just a cookbook. It was my life, every recipe paired with a story about strength, boundaries, and rediscovery. The local bookstore overflowed that day. Customers, friends, students, neighbors, even Ethan, standing quietly at the back, holding Mia's hand when it was my turn to speak. I looked at all those faces and said, at 65, I thought my life was ending. But sometimes, the end is just the beginning in disguise. What I thought was a collapse was actually a rebirth. I smiled, running my fingers over the worn cover of the book. This isn't a story about betrayal, I continued. It's a story about reclaiming yourself. About turning bitterness into sweetness, one choice, one day, one recipe at a time. The audience clapped. Ethan's eyes were wet. Little Mia waved from the back, shouting, "That's my grandma." And in that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't defined by the pain of what I lost, but by the courage it took to rebuild. That night, after the event, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and a slice of custard tart. The same recipe my grandmother had taught me decades ago. The city lights shimmered. And for the first time in years, I felt complete. I thought of that young nurse who once lived paycheck to paycheck. The single mother who sacrificed everything, the broken woman who was betrayed, and the reborn woman who built her own empire out of flour and faith. All of them were me. At 70, my life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Entirely mine. Sometimes, I still get letters from women who say my story gave them the courage to leave toxic families, start businesses, or simply believe they weren't too old to change, and every time, I write back the same line: it's never too late to start over, and it's never too early to stop letting others write your story. I looked out at the stars, took another sip of tea, and whispered to myself, I'm okay. Truly, I'm okay. And for the first time, I really meant it. If my story touched you, remember this: it's never too late to take your power back. No matter who broke you, no matter how deep the betrayal runs, you can still rebuild, you can still rise, and you can still start over. If you believe in second chances, hit subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes, healing begins with a story.